So guys, chapter 4 is really important because it lets us see kind of how the camps are organized a little bit more than we have thus far. So all of these capos, block altestes, block captains, lager capos, all of those people are other inmates that have been given power over and are kind of being put in charge of keeping everybody else in line for extra rations, for kind of better sleeping quarters, for better clothes. So they reward them with these kind of little things. And then, they kind of get to be in charge. And I don't know if you guys noticed this, but most of them, with the exception of the one buckle tested that he has named Alphonse on page 51, who is a kind person, most of them abuse their power. So this kind of goes back to the idea that humans, when given the opportunity and the authority, will abuse it. It's something kind of not so great about us, but it does seem to be a pretty common thread in humanity, is that if you're given any kind of power, you tend to use it and abuse it over the people under you. And we see that a lot, right? In particular with Ellie's whole thing with his tooth. So we have this Jewish dentist who's in charge of pulling Ellie's crown because it's gold, right? And they would then have melted that down and used it as gold, as currency, for kind of funding the Nazi war machine. But the dentist, he ends up not getting it pulled because he keeps telling the dentist he doesn't feel good. The dentist takes him at his word. And then the dentist is hung because he'd been dealing in prisoners' gold teeth for his own benefit, right? So we have this kind of moral gray area. Is it okay to take care of yourself when you're in this kind of a situation, even if the people that you are kind of taking advantage of are in the same situation as you, or even a little bit worse? Or do we owe more to each other than that? It's kind of an interesting thought to think about. And Ellie's tooth becomes really important because one of the other, Franek, the foreman, notices Ellie's gold tooth and wants it for himself. And the fact that they take out the pain on his father instead of him is highly effective. And again, it just shows us how the relationship is growing in this book, right? How much closer Ellie and his father are becoming to each other. That for Ellie, he watches his father get beaten for 2 weeks and then he has to give in, right? He cannot help it. The irony, of course, is that this is the second time that Ellie gives up something for basically nothing and receives nothing for it. Or at least, like with Franek, he gets it for a little bit. On page 56, he says, Franek became pleasant again. From time to time, he even gave me extra soup, but it didn't last long. 2 weeks later, all the Poles were transferred to another camp. I had lost my crown for nothing. And that happens with his shoes as well, as he talks about in this chapter. So Ellie has a bad experience with the fact that just things keep getting taken from him. He also has the run-ins with his capo Idek, right? Who again just beats people randomly. He beats Ellie for no reason the first time, and then the second time because Ellie accidentally caught him with another inmate having sex when he basically brought Ellie's entire block out to go work when they didn't need to, just because he wanted to have sex with an inmate. And he lashes him 25 times. Ellie almost dies from this. And it's just another show of this kind of abuse of power that we see. The biggest thing I want to talk about, though, are the hangings. So this is page 61 through 65. Ellie experiences 2 hangings at the end of this chapter. One of them doesn't really affect him at all. The first one that he sees, it's upsetting, I think, to him, but it really doesn't seem to bother him that much. He sees people die all the time. And as he says at the end of that first one, this is on page 63, I remember that on that evening, the soup tasted better than ever, right? Being so close to death has made Ellie much more grateful for being alive himself. And that's a pretty standard human experience, right? Sometimes being close to death can make you feel more alive by comparison. The second one, however, is deeply traumatizing to Ellie for a number of reasons. One, the Papel is actually loved. So normally, again, their Papels are these young children who are given, they're kind of like pages to Oberkapos and Lagerkapos and things like that. This would be those other inmates that have been put in charge of other inmates. And normally they're monsters, like the one that Ellie describes in Buna, who beat his father for not making his bed properly. They just become these like monsters. But this one was always sweet, and he was also beautiful, which I think was something that probably you didn't see very often in the camps. Most of these people are emaciated, they're terrified, they're upset, they've been beaten, which is never really an opportunity for somebody to look their best. So the fact that he's been able to retain this beauty is beautiful symbolism, right, of this kid's innocence, of his love, of his generous nature, and it's just kind of being exposed in that like outward form. And Ellie has to watch what he describes as an angel be hung in front of him, and even worse than that, it takes forever. The kid is too light to snap his neck when he falls, which is normally how hangings work. You get dropped from a height, and then the neck snaps, and so you don't actually suffocate most of the time. You die close to instantly because of that. But because he's not heavy enough, that never happened, and he's not heavy enough to choke himself properly. It takes him, like Ellie says, it takes him half an hour, right? More than half an hour for this kid to die. And Ellie is marched in front of him. And we're starting to see with this hanging, the Lager Capo refuses to act as executioner. He cannot do it. And again, this is a man who had no problem killing another inmate, another Jewish inmate. But this kid is a step too far. The fact that 3 SS have to step in and take their place again shows us that how much more monstrous the SS are, and how much they do not see these people as people. Even this beautiful kid who is so deeply loved by many. So Ellie, again, we're starting to see Ellie's crisis of faith, right? We saw it in chapter 3 when they were saying Kaddish for themselves. We see it again here, where when the person behind Ellie in the hanging asks, "Where is God?" and Ellie says, "There he is, hanging on this gallows." We see how much this has been ruined for Ellie. This thing that used to be so beautiful and so wonderful for him, and something that was so fulfilling, is now, the death of his faith. And it's being killed every single day by the SS and by the experiences that he's having in these camps. And again, Ellie's 14 years old, 15 years old. He's you guys' age, if a little younger. And he is just experiencing some of the most horrific things imaginable, day in and day out. So yeah, I think chapter 4 gives us a really, really kind of in-depth look at the camp. And we're going to see that again in chapter 5. All right. So make sure we're keeping up. Make sure you're asking me questions. I'll see you guys later. Bye.